going to give it to you as soon as I... Fred Fisher is going to introduce Frank Gehry tonight. Before that, we have an announcement. Patricia Ford.
Thank you. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Association of Women in Architecture to invite you to an opening that's this Saturday night at 8 p.m. at the Pacific Design Center in the 5th floor Grand Hall space. The Association of Women in Architecture is sponsoring the exhibit of the current work of international women architects. We have work shown at the Pacific Design Center from women from 8 countries: Belgium, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Finland, France, Sweden, Israel, and the United States. We'd be very happy to have you come and see this show. It will be open through November 23rd. The opening, again, is this Saturday night at 8 p.m. at the Pacific Design Center. Thank you.
Don't worry, it'll be real short. Tonight we're halfway through the series, and we're fortunate to have Frank Gehry presenting his work. Frank's work is perhaps the most difficult work we're going to see in the whole series, in that it's based on very unconventional references and unconventional imagery. It's clearly not beautiful. It resides, I think, somewhere between the sublime and the picturesque. The content of his work also evades conventional representation, and so it hasn't been very well reproduced or discussed. There's a dearth of secondary sources, so it's particularly good to be able to hear Frank talk about it himself. Frank is very much of a builder. He's over something like 18-year practice. He's built more buildings easily than everybody else in the series combined, of every conceivable scale. As a builder, he's focused on materials and processes of construction. He's also very much of a subversive. He subverts conventional notions of materials, completeness, and of form itself. He pushes himself and our notions about what can be done with a work of every scale, from a door to a downtown shopping center. He has a well-known obsession with art, which not only his connection with contemporary art, but with traditional art and music. He takes care to invest this with the people that work with him. I think most significantly, Frank offers us a particularly distinct way of seeing. It's a pleasure to introduce Frank Gehry.
The problem with doing a lot of buildings is you make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to pretend to read from this, but I probably won't. It looks so like I'm getting ready to sing in the choir or something. Can those lights be down just slightly? I see a few of my clients in the room, and I hope that they'll bear with me. This is supposed to be for students, and if I say anything about your projects, I'll deny it later. When I look at the list of people in this series, except for Roland, who is about my age, it seems that both he and I have been somewhat misplaced, and it's kind of unfair because the younger guys haven't had a chance to build as much. And so I hope, I just feel honored about being in that group. I think that as I've gotten older and watched what's going on in this town, I think there's more interesting work being produced today than any time in my experience here. And it's very exciting to see young people like Coy Howard and Fred Fisher and Thom Mayne and Eric Moss and a few others really putting it out there and taking some risks and fighting for kind of individual expression. I was just recently on the PA Awards jury and got to see some of this work in relation to the hot shots in the East, and I think that you'll find that California was well represented again. Several of the people I can't divulge the information, but there have been awards given to people from this area, and the work looked real good. And I hope that these younger people will get a chance to flourish, and that they will be encouraged, and that clients will take risks with them, because to develop, the rest of the world seems to be looking at us more and more. I think there's a freer spirit out here, maybe because there isn't any context to speak of, and so that what we build is out in the middle of nowhere, and it allows for a much freer expression. I also think that students coming out of school ought to choose the jobs they take and where they work very carefully. I think that in my own experience, I found that so much of the good talent that comes out of the schools is killed over the first few years because of involvement in offices that produce projects that are not challenging, and it tends to create a kind of a cynicism and something that I would urge students to avoid. That doesn't mean that makes it harder to find work, I know, but if I would choose who you work for and where you work and what you spend your time on very carefully. Also consider, like some of the people in this group, in this series, the possibility of starting out earlier and working in the field and building, actually getting into building. I see a lot of young people today actually working in construction, and I think my own experience is that building and getting to know materials is the one way to develop your own relationship with architecture. I want to mention to you an experience I just had in Miami, Florida. I was on a panel with 3 of the Rats. Does everybody know who they are? There's a group of European architects called the Rationalists, and I was on a panel with 3 of them, the Creer brothers, Leon and Rob Creer, and Massimo Scoleri. Scoleri has been through here, and I guess Creer has. I haven't been aware that he was here. I found them to be very intelligent people, very exciting to be with and very exciting to be exposed to. And they left me with a lot of questions, and I don't know if it's of any interest to students in Los Angeles. I hope it is, because they are ideas. There is a strong force on the part of these people who are teaching and publishing work to deny innovation. And it left me kind of feeling strange, because I finally got to the point where I thought that's what it's all about, to create new ideas, to develop ideas. And here I was confronted with a sort of a wave of young people opting for ideas pre-industrial revolution and claiming that everything that happened since the industrial revolution has been co-opted by consumerism, and that therefore we must go back and accept the ideas that were on the table before and use those to build architecture. I always thought it was a basic human need to be curious and to want to explore ideas and to understand natural principles. Now, I have problems with the way our cities are built too, and I feel that some of their planning ideas are damn good, and that they should be understood and considered. However, I personally have a problem with the idea that there is no longer a need for speculation, innovation, and pluralism. And so at some point, maybe we can talk about that after I'm through showing my pictures. Let's see. I personally have been trying to develop a vocabulary, a personal vocabulary, and I've been searching for beauty, even though Fred Fisher says my buildings aren't beautiful. I guess everybody can define beauty in their own terms. What I'm searching for is a way to make beautiful buildings. I'm searching and looking and trying and playing with a personal language, and I don't intend it as something that should be, I'm not looking for a following, I'm looking for an interchange of ideas with people who are also speculating, trying things, and are curious. I hope that my work is added to is putting information on the table and adding to the scene, to the pot. My own work is, as a builder, has been very schizophrenic. I've done work for speculative developers, and I've done work for individual house clients, and I found that the personal exploration is much easier with the smaller projects. I'm sure all of you agree with that. And that's probably why at the PA Awards, most of the submissions were houses. I think it's a national or international phenomenon. I don't think that it's possible to explore as easily innovative ideas in large-scale projects. So maybe the way to do it is with the small project, and I find that a lot of the ideas I develop for myself do have application. Slides. I'm going to go quickly through a bunch of early work. This is going back to the beginnings of my practice in 1960. I started in 62 in Santa Monica, and this building was completed in 67. It's the Meriwether Post Pavilion in Maryland. It now has a double chain link fence around it. This is a Danziger building on Melrose and Sycamore, 1964. A Japanese art show at the LA County Museum in 66. installation for Billy Al Bankston at LA County Museum in '68, I believe. Joseph Magnan's store in Costa Mesa, 1965 or 6, I think. It's just recently been remodeled by Massimo Vignelli, so it's all gone. Cardboard furniture in the 60s, and this is an exploration of material. And a high-rise building in Baltimore, not the building in the foreground, the building in the background. A small hay barn in 1966 down in Mission Viejo. A building in New Mexico where I got involved with the idea of relating to the sky and the imagery of that region. The building is light blue, like in the former slide. A small house for Ed Jantz, who's interested in log cabins and such. The idea was the gray material is a corrugated asbestos with a very high-tech entrance and a log cabin fence and trellis. This was done in 68 or 9. It was not built. This is a headquarters building for the Rouse Company in Baltimore, Columbia, Maryland. And an interior using indirect lighting, which we developed and became quite interested in. Hollywood Bowl, interim stage of which there are vestigial remnants at this point. But that was intended for 1 year. It was made of cardboard tubes. And then a plan or solution for the removing of the old stage and creating a more flexible stage, a bridge-like structure that allowed for change. This was never built. The working drawings have been completed, and it was shelved, and they call me every once in a while and act like they're going to start it again. But I put all those lights on the Santa Monica Pier about 6 weeks before the energy thing became an issue. And this is a residence for Ron Davis, done in 1970. And this building comes back to, as a reference and continuing reference in the work. It's a large box, a container, the container being a separate sculptural idea, and then infilled with a series of events of separate sculptural ideas at different periods of time. So that bridge was added, and then the little boxes. And the attempt was to create an interior imagery that was a counter to in opposition to the original form, and you can see I wasn't very successful in doing that. It tends to fit so nicely into context. UCLA Placement Center a couple of years ago, and the interior, and a atrium building in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is it's an existing building. We blasted a hole through 7 floors. And then in Concord, California, a very environmentally sound project. You can't even see it. It's in there somewhere. And when you get closer to it, you read the earth form. The idea was not to disturb the terrain, and also to create a barrier for sound from the outside and from the inside. And then inside there was this nice pavilion. And that building was surrounded with chain link. And we designed that chain link. And then we were called back to design an entry structure and I started to use that terrible material as a kind of a sculptural form. And this was an earlier model of a project that wasn't built, using the chain link to create a kind of a pavilion, or I don't know what you call it, something, sitting in the trees. And then a house that we've been working on for a long time that looks like it's going to be built eventually, out in Malibu. This is the Wagner House, and it's sliding down a hill. It's the client is one of the people that started the Coastal Commission. And so it was ironic that he came to me, but he wanted not to damage the site. He wanted to leave it as natural as possible, and so we designed a pole house that traversed the site and is essentially a box. And because the site sloped, we sloped the box, and there are 3 levels, and then these are appendages of small boxes that would be added a later date, would be separate rooms. And in front of that building, to kind of reinforce the form of the building, we used a chain link fence as a sculptural element to that looks like the building had just slid out of its skin about 20 feet. And then a large-scale shopping center which is under construction in Santa Monica. I brought all these projects because the last lecture I gave of some students, I just showed the newest work in the little houses, and some of the students asked me if they'd heard I did other work and why didn't I show it, and I said, well, it's bigger work and it's filled with compromise and so on and so forth, and I mealy-mouthed about it, and then they said, well, they felt it was important to show the whole shot, so that's what I'm doing. This is the shopping center in Santa Monica, 2 department stores, and typical mall, and the structure, the court in the middle, parking structure in each of the other corners, and in terms of urban connection, we made a vest pocket park in the middle of each block so that they would relate and possibly become connectors for the future to similar spaces across the street. This is the diagram of the original idea. It was to develop a colonnade that went through the center. It's about 450 feet from the green box to the yellow one. And the idea was to create 3, take the diagram, which is very usual in a shopping center, the court in front of each department store and the one in the middle, and make those into separate objects and try to make them individual buildings so that as you went down this street, the scale changed and it didn't look like a typical shopping center that just became an amorphic, formless space. This is a model which is somewhat misleading because there would be levels of shops here. But the idea of the colonnade crashing into the center building and letting the center building stand as a discrete object in the space is kind of a major breakthrough. I mean, the department store people who sort of dictate a lot of the criteria for these centers had a hard time with just this one column. This is the court that faces 2nd Street and to the ocean, and it has levels of outdoor terraces accessible to the public. And this was a requirement imposed by the Coastal Commission to, in order to build this center, the developer had to build outdoor public deck that was accessible to the public. And so what these will be are terraces that will open from restaurants and coffee shops, and could possibly be quite a pleasant space. This is another court that is opposite the Sears store on Colorado Street. And here we used the ramps and stairways to try and express a different idea. It was really hard. Our original intention was to make each court have a different quality. And over time, it just got worn down to quite a similar expression. We were not allowed to change materials as I'd hoped, and but I think it still will be interesting. The parking garages are very basic, and they're covered with a facade to try and lighten them. And the idea was that each of these objects the courts, the parking garage, and the department stores, which I don't show because we didn't design them, are individual buildings and try to relate to the city scale. This is the sort of a glass barn that's at the end of the existing pedestrian mall that comes down and dovetails into this project. So this is Broadway, and the existing mall comes in here. Then the other parking garage, we explored the inevitable chain link idea. The problem with these projects, and if you've ever done a parking garage, you know that the budget allows for just simple handrails, and with that budget we tried to do something a little more interesting, so that for every place you took out the handrail, you could supply this much chain link. The idea here was, if you've seen the book on Santa Monica, old Santa Monica, and the old Lick Pier with the big letters, this was an attempt to emulate that and get back some of that graphic. To do this, we hired one of the architects in town who does graphic work, Craig Hodgetts, and Craig was responsible for this design and using the big letters and the configuration, which we thought would be quite spectacular. Are we all together? This design was not accepted by the Santa Monica, and this one was. So we're going to hang a curtain of chain link, and don't get worried, it's not as bad as that. And this is a mock-up of it on an existing garage down in Lakewood somewhere. So our garage won't have that brown spandrel. It'll just have like the vertical columns and a very thin edge and be quite dark. And the chain link will be hung in two colors, and ought to be quite filmy and not as blatant as that original model shot is. This is an arts park for the San Fernando Valley and the Sepulveda Dam, which I think Fred Fisher worked on in my office. It's a similar program to the one in New York that Hugh Hardy did. It's a 2,500 seat theater, several craft studios and shops for doing craft work. It's mostly a park and outdoor dancing areas, and I collaborated with Larry Halpern on this project. So he did the overall park plan, and then we set this building that started out as a theater and stairs and ramps and a walkway with some palm trees. And then I got fascinated with the image of a pineapple up there. And when this scheme was presented, the members of the Sierra Club in Los Angeles withdrew their support of the project because of the pineapple. I don't know what it was. I think I was distorting the image of a pineapple or something. Well, I was afraid that when I presented the project, people would ask me about solar energy. And so I decided to make the solar energy idea a part of the project from the beginning. This is a diagram, you understand. It was a very early scheme. Where it's going to go, I have no idea. It's just a bunch of ideas put down for reference and to get some reaction from the community, and we got some. Those strange forms are just an idea of creating a more festive atmosphere using solar panels or whatever comes along that makes sense in terms of energy at the time this is built. So it's just an idea. And this is not my project, but we all are, I assume we all are, I've talked to other people who are, fascinated with the rough construction, buildings under construction, and the idea of what happens to them when they're covered up and how they all lose. We're always disappointed how they all lose that fresh quality and go downhill. And so I explored that idea in a house for some friends in California. It's not going to be built. It was just 2 boxes, and it was knit together with this kind of rough carpentry. And the rough carpentry, it was intended, would be covered with glass panels. And it was supposed to be very inexpensive. Several years ago, I did a project for Gemini Lithography. Is that my time up? That's that first, the gray thing to here, to this line, is what I did. From there to there. From there to there was done by Craig Elwood. And then I did this last year from here to here. I didn't do from here to here. And I didn't do that thing. But originally the idea was to incorporate this building into the complex. And so we used the same color that Craig Elwood used and made that kind of 6-inch overlay and exposed the cornice and parts of the old building. And then made that gesture up to incorporate the old billboard. Also, as you drive along Melrose Boulevard east of La Cienega, at this point the road curves, and that line tends to make it look like the building is also curving. So I was playing with that illusion. We then were asked to build a new part, and this is the new building, a vault and a gallery. And I'm not showing a lot of pictures of it because you can go see it if you want to. The idea was to break down the scale and make individual parts, including the 2 Butler buildings, so that and the cars, so it related somehow to the context of Melrose Boulevard. So it's a contextual piece. And this is inside the courtyard, this using the idea of the rough framing with the glass from the earlier house. Once I get onto something, I just can't let go. And this thing sort of worms its way through that box and destroys it, maybe. The building has not been photographed professionally, so these are just our own pictures. And the interior is used as a gallery. This is a house that's under construction, and I apologize for the model, but we were under a tight budget, as was the client, and so we never made a finished model. She just built it, for real. This is in Venice on Horizon, and it's two houses, one house in the front for rental and one house in the back for the owner. And this is it under construction. I'm not used to showing construction pictures, but I don't have anything on this building, and a lot of people are calling me and say they like it, so I thought I better include it right now, because I'm not I usually wait until the thing is finished before I show it. That's the rear. There's a courtyard between the two. And this again is the exposed wood framing, some of it behind glass. The views are spectacular from up above and so on. This is a World Savings and Loan in California have gotten interested in architecture, and they've hired a lot of architects to do, a lot of good architects to do buildings for them. Tim Vreeland recently did one that won an award. Bill Turnbull has done some. Charlie Moore has done some. And so we started out building this. This is in Burbank. And we started out with this idea of layering, which is a new word in architecture, not just California architecture. But it's an old idea. And the idea here is that the glass facade would use the lines of the mullions to develop a perspective, and that behind it would be a wall which has some kind of relationship to a house or the form of a house, the idea being that banks finance houses and housing. And we started out with the two boxes connected, but then the budget, it was too expensive, so we cut out the middle part to save money. And found that we could still achieve the quality we wanted. However, we didn't save quite enough money by doing that. So we then had, I don't have pictures of the final model, but it's going to be built. And we then cut out the back part, but left just a wall with holes punched in it back there. So it's going to have just a lollipop stuck up with holes. And then the future expansion would add that piece. So somehow you get your way if you hold down long enough. And down in, how's my time? Down in San Pedro, there's a parking lot that we were asked to build a marine biology museum on. And so this is the context of our problem. This is by the ocean, near the San Pedro Harbor, an army post up on the hill, a lot of chain link fence, a lot of asphalt, a lot of cars, a lot of buses, all the things that I liked. And so I reluctantly accepted the job. And came up with this idea. Now, the community felt that the building ought to have a relationship to Spanish colonial architecture. And I told them that they were all wrong about that because they were down in the harbor, and if they were really interested in context, they had to be involved with the boats and the machinery and the equipment and the chain link and so on. And it took a lot of it took a lot of discussion, and finally they agreed to build this. Now, these are just simple boxes knitted together with all this stuff. And that's, I don't have tremendous photographs of it, but it's just being completed. You can get a sniff at what it looks like. This is the courtyard in the middle, which will be used for outdoor exhibits and hanging of whale bones and so on, and banners. And then I put in a little Caesar Pelli building. I hid it. I mean, it's damn hard to follow his act, so I hid it in the corner like that. And that's an enclosure for a tide pool that opens to the inside. And there you can see the relationship to the site, and the boats and the hardware and so on. Then in New York, a couple of years ago, I was hired to do a townhouse, remodel a townhouse on 69th Street. And I started into a design that is not possible to build for a lot of reasons. It wasn't a cost issue. It had to do with timing and other personal criteria. And so we decided to back off and do a much simpler design, which is under construction now, but which I don't have pictures of. So I'm just going to show you the original idea because it's an idea that's starting to fester, and I'm starting to work on a new building in New York, which will probably relate to this idea. Nice existing carriage house. And the fantasy was to build, it's for a lady and her daughter, to build two buildings, one for her and one for her daughter, join it with a kind of a entertainment floor. And then the fantasy here was that it'd be covered with grass and that she'd go out and buy the Monet triptych to hang and some kind of a skylight form. And this is a model of the idea with the two houses, the one in the front, the one in the back, and the entertainment area under a skylight. And then from the front, it would just be the existing facade left pretty much intact, except at the third floor, the glass would be taken out and the form of the inside house would start to appear. And it was intended that that be built in a material similar in color in brick to this one, so that it started to it wasn't as blatant as a changed material, that it would sort of be more subtle. And this is a picture we found a few weeks ago in New York of a townhouse that I guess somebody is doing something like. I don't know what they're going to do to it, but the idea of cutting away everything and leaving the facade exposed and building behind it, if you can imagine, would be kind of a nice idea. The inside of that building would have, this would be that entertainment floor with the front house, and some kind of a stairway connection. And this is a section through it showing the front house and the rear house and all the levels. This is a floor for help, and this is a ground floor guest house, and there's a kitchen here and parking here, and there's so many things in this program on 25 by 100 square feet that it's amazing to get it all in. But essentially the entertainment floor would be this floor, and these objects would be freestanding and floating in the space, and the spaces between the existing walls and the new building would be very narrow and kind of create a very sculptural, I don't know what, but it I think that's the end of that projector. Yeah. Another building in California, on the corner of Barry and Wilshire. If you look up at night on the 6th floor, you get this kind of weird landscape. This is a continuation of the work with indirect light, and it goes into an existing office building where every floor is covered with that same acoustical tile and drop-in lighting system. Instead, we painted the ceilings white. There were existing ducts in the space, floating around, all in preparation for a hung ceiling. And we made a model of everything that was existing, and then played off that with these forms, which became troughs for fluorescent fixtures for indirect light. And then the individual offices became separate, identifiable objects in the space. And then in Maryland, we did a project for Toyota, which has just been published. And it's essentially a warehouse building. We added some pods on the outside for executive offices. This imagery referred to the warehouse imagery of big trucks parked up against loading docks, and that's where the idea came from. And then again inside the indirect light, and creating intersecting panels, all of sheetrock, and exposing the ceiling and just directing light against it. And then a couple years ago, I guess by now, I bought a house in Santa Monica, and for any of you who've seen it, this is what it looked like before I tampered with it. There's a bay window that was here in the living room, which I kept. It wasn't a very important work of architecture as it existed. It was kind of a nice house. My wife found it and liked it, and she's got a good sense of humor, and she knew I would not leave it the way it was. And I spent a lot of time contemplating it, and decided to try and leave it intact and try to build something around it that made it itself a more important object by the changes I made to it, and also created a contradiction in that it would be more open and more accessible from the street than the houses around, where they have tiny windows and you don't sense any relationship between people on the outside and the inside. You go, all of my neighbors' houses feel like they're very enclosed fortresses, although they they're very simple little boxes. They don't allow any interchange between people on the street and the inside. And so I tried to break that down without separating, without losing the privacy. Also, this house is in a transition neighborhood. The next door neighbor on this side and across the road are multi-housing. And so across the road, all of the buildings are built right out to the property line. The original house is up there in plan. That's the bay window. And I added the space around it, which became a kitchen, dining room, whatever. And the upstairs terrace and master bedroom and bath. This model was made to send to an exhibit in New York, and with the intention of upsetting the people in New York who are very precise about architecture. They are awfully careful back there. The kitchen window was something that was a difficult one to work on. And this was the original sketch. And then this was the attempt to realize that sketch, which using mullions and wood members. And I guess it took about a month of playing with these forms, and this is one of them, trying to develop this form in space, and I didn't quite get it to where I wanted, but there's kind of the resolution of it. And that's what's built. And then the model of the corner. We spent a lot of time on this corner window too. And we ended up building some full-scale mock-ups of these joints to give to the carpenter because it was the only way to transfer the information. And there's the reality of it. I'm not going to show you too much of the outside. I thought I'd show the pictures of the inside because the present owners won't let anybody in. My wife is going to have a baby in the next couple of days, and she's won't let me bring in people. I used to invade her privacy constantly with friends and relatives. This is the way it is now. The intention is to put a hedge or something on top of this and get a private front garden. And then the picture window in the back opens up to the cactus. And then from the inside, looking back, you get a picture out of the trees. And the whole idea of what I was trying to do was to relate to those trees and make those a part of the house. So from inside, those trees become a very important issue. And here again are the wood studs behind glass. We used wire glass pretty much throughout. Not because of code, but because I liked it. And exposed a lot of the interior framing. You see the old framing in the background in that picture. And that's inside the kitchen, which is kind of on wheels. All of this stuff moves and can be reconfigured. And the floor is experimental. We used asphalt paving. Not to be funny, actually, just because I wanted to heighten that illusion of indoor-outdoor with this. And I don't know of any other material that would have made that statement as strongly as asphalt in relation, so it became like a driveway in relation to the old house. And this is that corner window looking out. And there you can see the old house is perfectly intact. Whoops. And at night there's some beautiful reflections which I didn't plan on, but they're there and I claim credit for. There's the bay window with its new cabinets that are kind of an enlargement of that small window mullion thing at the top. And in the rear, the space wraps around the old house. And up through, it's exposed up through. This is the old kitchen and the old kitchen window. And it's some sort of seating area which we haven't resolved yet. And portions of the old house, including parts of the old paint, are left. And my son is adding his graffiti. And from the old house, you look into the new kitchen and out through the new kitchen window. That picture was taken by the young fellow that just died, John Nicolay. He came through and took some of these pictures are really due to his genius, but this one especially was very funny. That's upstairs in the bedroom looking out. I didn't want the place to be cleaned up. The intention was that anything can be, the clutter and the toys and the stuff, not to be precious. It's kind of the antithesis of the kind of architecture that makes it imperative to put certain kinds of furniture and certain relationships to certain other kinds of furniture. And I wanted it to be a lot freer than that and not compromise the what I was doing with the building. When the window screens are not being used as window screens, they're turned up and become part of the layering of the screens and the chain link and the wire glass. And when this window is open, it's flapped out and this is down. So it's and you can walk on that. This is a new project that is not built. This is an existing condition, Loyola Law School campus on Valencia Street, near 9th on the left and Olympic on the right, and that's their existing parking garage. That's the existing law school. Our new building will go here, and we meddle with some of these buildings. And I think we even meddle with an addition that Ray Cappy did to that building. So, don't shoot me. You didn't? Oh, okay. Anyway, our original program was the gray objects there are existing, and the new plan was to build an office building and to take the big classrooms, which if they were in the office building would make the spans, the clear spans, difficult. So we took those out and made those type 5 buildings so they would be cheaper and so that they could become the architecture and create a kind of a campus. Those become the classrooms. There would be classrooms in the upper left-hand one, and that would be turned into a library, and that would be the parking. For some reason, the board of directors of this school didn't like that building. It was set in the space askew, like I want to do sometimes, and it really bothered them. However, we created a colonnade under that building, the big building, and used that as a backdrop and created a street that went the full length from Olympic to 9th Street. There was a pedestrian campus street, and that you would then walk between these buildings and enter the colonnade, and it made it a kind of a nice scale and nice rhythm. And when that was taken out, we got into trouble of what to do in that space.